The mop made wet circles on the floor as Dennis Walsh pushed it across the metal surface. His back hurt from bending over all day, but he kept working. Nobody else wanted the night shift in the cargo levels of Orbital Station Meridian 7, which suited him just fine. Down here in the Forgotten Corners, he could work in peace while hundreds of alien species conducted their business 5 levels above his head. Dennis emptied his bucket into the drain and checked his assignment list. One more bay to inspect before his shift ended. Storage Bay 47C was scheduled for decompression in the morning, which meant anything left inside would get sucked out into space. His job was to make sure nothing valuable got tossed by mistake. Usually these bays held nothing but broken equipment and trash. He punched in his access code and the heavy door slid open with a hiss. Cold air rushed out, much colder than it should be. Dennis frowned and stepped inside, his breath forming small clouds. The temperature controls must have failed again. He made a mental note to report it, though the maintenance requests from janitors rarely got attention. The bay looked empty at first. Stacks of old crates lined the walls, covered in dust and shipping labels from a dozen different worlds. Dennis walked between them, sweeping his flashlight across the shadows. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it over the hum of the ventilation system. A chirp, soft and desperate. Dennis froze and listened. There it was again, coming from behind a pile of containers marked with red biohazard symbols. He squeezed between the crates, his coveralls catching on sharp edges. In the corner, partially hidden under a torn thermal blanket, sat a shipping crate about the size of a footlocker. The chirping came from inside. His hands shook as he lifted the lid. 3 small creatures huddled together in the bottom of the crate, their bodies pressed tight for warmth. They looked like tiny dragons from old Earth stories, with scales that should have shimmered but instead looked dull and gray. Each one was barely bigger than his hand. Their wings were folded against their sides, thin membranes stretched over delicate bones. Frost covered their bodies and their eyes were barely open. Dennis had worked on the station for 11 years. He had seen plenty of strange aliens, but he knew what these were. Everyone in the galaxy knew about Dracons, even if most people had never seen one. They were supposed to be extinct. Their world had burned in a war 30 years ago, or at least that was the official story. The news report said no survivors remained. But here were 3 babies, freezing to death in a crate marked as biological waste. The smallest one made a sound like a kitten mewling. Its chest moved with quick, shallow breaths. Dennis reached in slowly and touched its side. The scales felt like ice. These creatures were minutes away from dying. He pulled off his thermal jacket and wrapped it around all 3 of them, tucking the edges tight. The babies barely moved, too weak to react. Dennis lifted the bundle carefully and held it against his chest. His shirt was thin and the cold from their bodies seeped through immediately, but he didn't care. His mind raced. Station regulations were clear. Any unauthorized biological material had to be reported to security within 1 hour of discovery. Failure to report meant immediate termination and possible criminal charges. If these really were Dracons, the penalties would be even worse. The Galactic Heritage Preservation Act made it illegal to possess remains of extinct species. Life imprisonment was the standard sentence. Dennis looked down at the bundle in his arms. One of the babies shifted slightly and made that small chirping sound again. Through a gap in the jacket, he saw a tiny eye open and look up at him. Just for a second. Then it closed again. His daughter Sarah would have been 23 now if she had lived. He remembered holding her in the hospital, feeling how fragile she was, knowing he couldn't protect her from the genetic disease that would take her before her 5th birthday. He remembered the helplessness, the rage at a universe that would let a child suffer. He wasn't helpless now. Dennis tucked the bundle under his shirt and zipped his coveralls over it. The station had thousands of maintenance tunnels that bypassed the main corridors. He knew every one of them. His quarters were small and cold, but they had heat and privacy. Nobody ever visited the service level unless something broke. He moved quickly through the bay and sealed the door behind him. His keycard opened the maintenance access panel, and he slipped into the narrow tunnel beyond. Pipes and cables lined the walls, and his footsteps echoed on the metal grating. The route to his quarters would take 15 minutes if he hurried. Halfway there, one of the babies moved against his chest. A tiny claw poked through his shirt. Dennis stopped and carefully adjusted the bundle, making sure they could breathe. The smallest one was shivering less now, drawing warmth from his body. Its scales felt slightly warmer. When he reached his quarters, Dennis sealed the door and dimmed the lights. His room was barely 10 feet square, with a bunk, a storage locker, and a small bathroom. Not much, but it was home. He set the bundle on his bed and unwrapped it carefully. All 3 babies were still alive. Their breathing seemed stronger and their scales showed hints of color now, blue and silver and deep green. Beautiful. The smallest one opened both eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him with intelligence behind that gaze. Dennis found his emergency medical kit and pulled out the thermal blankets he was supposed to use only for station emergencies. He wrapped each baby separately and placed them together on his bed. Then he turned up the heat in his quarters as high as it would go. The station would charge him extra for the power usage, but he had savings. He sat on the floor and watched them. The babies huddled together, their breathing gradually becoming more regular. After 10 minutes, the largest one lifted its head and chirped. Not a distress call this time. Something different. Almost curious. Dennis smiled despite everything. Despite the fact that he had just committed a crime. Despite knowing he would probably be caught eventually. Despite the impossibility of what he was trying to do. One of the babies stretched its wings slightly and yawned, showing tiny teeth. Then it curled back against its siblings and closed its eyes. Dennis pulled out his datapad and began searching for information about Dracon care and feeding. He had no idea what he was doing, but he would figure it out. He had to. The smallest dragon made a sound like a purr. For the first time in years, Dennis Walsh felt like his life meant something. 3 weeks of stolen moments had passed since Dennis found the babies. His quarters now looked nothing like the sparse room it had been. Thermal blankets hung from the walls for insulation. A makeshift nest of soft fabrics filled one corner, materials he had collected from the stations lost and found over multiple shifts. Heat lamps salvaged from storage compartments kept the temperature warm enough that the dragons no longer shivered. The dragons themselves had transformed. Each was now the size of a large cat, their scales bright and healthy. The biggest one, who Dennis called Pip, had deep blue scales that caught the light. The middle dragon, Dot, was silver with hints of purple. The smallest Clover had green scales the color of spring grass back on Earth. They followed Dennis around the small room whenever he was home, chirping and climbing over each other to get close to him. Dennis learned their needs through trial and error. The station's waste management system provided more than enough food scraps. Dracons were omnivores, he discovered, eating everything from protein packs to vegetable matter. They needed calcium for their growing bones, so he ground up mineral supplements meant for other species and mixed it into their meals. They needed exercise, so he let them climb the walls of his quarters, their claws finding purchase on every surface. They needed warmth and touch, so he spent every free moment with them, talking about his day while they curled in his lap. But Pip had developed a cough 2 days ago. It started small, just an occasional wheeze. Now the blue dragon breathed with obvious difficulty, her sides heaving with each breath. She barely ate and spent most of her time sleeping while her siblings played. Dennis had tried everything he could think of, but nothing helped. He was a janitor, not a doctor. He had no training for this. He sat on his bed and gently stroked Pip's head. The dragon's eyes opened briefly, and she made a soft sound before closing them again. Her breathing rattled in her chest. Dennis pulled out his datapad and stared at it. He had been so careful for 3 weeks, never accessing information that might flag his account, never staying in his quarters longer than normal, maintaining his perfect work record so nobody would notice him. But careful meant watching Pip die, and he couldn't do that. His fingers moved across the screen. The station's xenobiological database required special clearance, but maintenance workers had backdoor access for emergency repairs to medical equipment. Dennis used his credentials and searched for Dracon respiratory systems. Pages of information appeared, most of it technical jargon he barely understood. He downloaded files on common illnesses, treatment protocols, and medication interactions. An alert appeared on his screen. His access had been logged and flagged for review. Security AI would analyze unusual database queries within 24 hours. Dennis closed the pad and looked at Pip. Worth it. Whatever happened, it was worth it. The next evening, Dennis cleaned the medical clinic on level 8 as usual. The work was mindless, sweeping and mopping and emptying trash while doctors and nurses worked around him like he was invisible. Most days he appreciated being ignored. Today he needed it. Rena was the exception. The young Valtorian medical technician always smiled at him and sometimes asked about his day. Her species looked almost human except for the slight blue tint to their skin and the geometric patterns that marked their faces. She was organizing supplies near the medicine storage when Dennis pushed his cleaning cart past. "You look tired, Dennis," she said without looking up from her inventory pad. "Long shifts," he replied, trying to sound casual. "Are you feeling okay? You have been looking exhausted all week." Dennis paused. He had prepared a dozen excuses, but standing there in front of her genuine concern, he couldn't use any of them. Pip was getting worse. She might not survive another day without real medical help. "Can I show you something?" The words came out before he could stop them. Rena looked at him with surprise. In the year they had known each other, he had never asked her for anything. She glanced around the clinic, confirmed they were alone, and nodded. Dennis pulled out his datapad and opened the video file he had recorded that morning. The screen showed Pip lying in her nest, struggling to breathe. Her scales looked dull and her eyes were half closed. The sound of her wheezing filled the quiet clinic. Rena stared at the screen. Her face went through several expressions at once. Shock, confusion, and then something that looked like wonder. "Is that real? Is that a living Dracon?" "I found 3 of them. They were going to die. This one is sick and I don't know how to help her." "Where did you find them? When? How have you kept them hidden?" Rena's questions came fast, but her voice stayed low. She understood the danger without being told. Dennis explained quickly. The cargo bay, the freezing babies, the 3 weeks of secret care. Rena listened without interrupting, her eyes never leaving the image of Pip on the screen. "She has a respiratory infection," Rena said finally. "See how her breathing is labored? And the discharge from her nostrils? She needs antibiotics specifically designed for reptilian species. Without treatment, the infection will spread to her lungs, and she will die within days. Can you help?" Rena was quiet for a long moment. Dennis watched her think, saw the conflict on her face. She was risking everything if she agreed. Her career, her freedom, possibly her life. They barely knew each other beyond friendly greetings and small talk. "The law says they are extinct," Rena said slowly, "but they are not extinct. They are here, they are real, and they are suffering." She looked at Dennis. "Show me the security footage of how you access your quarters. I need to know the best time to visit without being seen." Relief flooded through Dennis so strongly his knees felt weak. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This is extremely dangerous for both of us." Rena moved to a locked cabinet and began entering codes. "I can get antibiotics and monitoring equipment, but you need to know something. Security is already investigating unusual database access. Someone with maintenance credentials searched the xenobiology files yesterday. They will trace it to you within a week at most." "I know. I had to risk it." Rena pulled out several packages of medicine and tucked them into her bag. "Then we have very little time. I will come to your quarters tonight after my shift ends. If anyone asks, I am checking on a maintenance issue with the medical waste processor near the service levels." She walked past him toward the door, then paused. "Dennis, what you did for these creatures, saving them when no one else would. My people have a saying. The measure of a being is not in their power or status, but in how they treat those who cannot defend themselves." That night, Rena came to his quarters as promised. She moved through the maintenance tunnels with confidence, following the route Dennis had described. When he opened his door, her eyes went immediately to the corner where all 3 dragons waited. Pip lay in the center of the nest, her breathing harsh and labored. Dot and Clover pressed against their sick sibling, trying to comfort her with their presence. When they saw Rena, both healthy dragons moved protectively in front of Pip, their small wings spread and smoke curling from their nostrils. "It is all right," Dennis said softly. "She is here to help." Rena knelt slowly near the nest and opened her medical bag. She worked with calm efficiency, scanning Pip with handheld equipment and checking the readings. The dragons watched her every move but didn't attack. After several minutes, Rena prepared an injection. Hold her steady. This will hurt, but it will help. Dennis cradled Pip gently while Rena administered the shot. The dragon squeaked and tried to pull away, but Dennis held firm. When it was done, Pip curled against his chest and whimpered. She needs 3 more doses over the next week, Rena explained. Keep her warm and make sure she drinks water. The antibiotics will work, but her body needs time to heal. What do I owe you? Rena packed her equipment and stood. You owe me nothing, but I need to tell you something else. Security is not just looking for whoever accessed the database. Someone high up in the station administration is pushing for a full investigation. They are asking questions about the cargo bay where you found the dragons. Someone knows these creatures survived. Dennis felt cold despite the warmth of his quarters. What should I do? Keep them hidden. Trust no one except those who have already helped you. And prepare for the possibility that you may need to move them somewhere safer. Rena moved toward the door, then looked back at the 3 dragons. They are beautiful. The universe should not have lost such creatures. What you are doing matters. After she left, Dennis sat with Pip through the night. The blue dragon's breathing gradually eased as the medicine took effect. By morning, she was sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. Clover and Dot curled up on either side of their sick sister. Dennis watched them and wondered how much time they had before everything fell apart. Pip recovered over the following days, her breathing returning to normal and her appetite coming back strong. Dennis continued his routine of work and secret care, but everything felt different now. Rena visited twice more to check on the dragons and bring additional medicine. Each visit meant more risk, but she never hesitated. The dragons were growing fast. They reached the size of large dogs within another week, their bodies filling out with muscle and their wings developing proper strength. Pip could now breathe small puffs of flame when excited. Dot had discovered she could manipulate small objects with surprising precision, using her claws like fingers. Clover remained the smallest but was also the most vocal, chirping and trilling constantly when Dennis was home. The problem was space. His quarters were too small for 3 rapidly growing dragons. They needed room to move and exercise. Their calls were getting louder, echoing through the thin walls into neighboring rooms. Other service workers were starting to notice strange sounds coming from his quarters. One evening, Dennis returned from his shift to find a note slipped under his door. Simple words in neat handwriting. I know what you are hiding. I want to help. Leave your door unlocked tomorrow at 200 hours. Dennis stared at the note for a long time. It could be a trap. Security could be testing him. But if someone wanted to arrest him, they could do it any time. He left the door unlocked as instructed. At exactly 2 in the morning, his door opened. A figure slipped inside, moving with the peculiar grace of a Catraxian. The insectoid being was about 5 feet tall, with 4 arms and a chitinous exoskeleton that gleamed under the dim lights. Large compound eyes reflected the room in multiple facets. I am Chithrax, the being said in a clicking voice. I work in environmental engineering. My quarters are next to yours. I have been hearing unusual sounds for days. The 3 dragons emerged from their nest, curious about the visitor. Chithrax went completely still, all 4 arms held motionless. By the ancient hives, Chithrax whispered. Dracons. Living dracons. I thought I would never see such a thing in my lifetime. Are you going to report me? Dennis kept his body between Chithrax and the dragons. Report you? No, I came to help. Chithrax moved slightly closer and the dragons didn't retreat. Your species has a gift, human. You nurture life in all its forms. My people build and maintain. But you humans protect and care for creatures that are not your own. It is a rare quality in the galaxy. Why do you want to help? Because what was done to the Dracon species was wrong. Everyone knows it, but no one speaks of it. They were eliminated because they refused to become weapons. The military coalition wanted to use their fire and their strength in the war against the outer reaches. When the dragons refused, they were declared a threat and their world was destroyed. Genocide disguised as collateral damage. Dennis had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made his anger burn hotter. 3 innocent babies were all that remained of an entire civilization, and they had been marked for disposal like trash. These dragons need better facilities, Chithrax continued. Better ventilation, proper heating systems, and space to grow. I can build these things. I know of a place. An abandoned water reclamation facility in the lower maintenance levels. No one goes there anymore since the new systems came online. How can I trust you? Chithrax clicked softly, a sound that might have been laughter. You cannot. But I am trusting you with the knowledge that I am helping you. We are both vulnerable now. Over the next 3 days, Chithrax and Dennis worked together during their off hours. The insectoid engineer had skills Dennis never imagined. Chithrax installed heating systems, rigged ventilation that would mask any sounds, and even created a filtration system that would handle the waste from 3 growing dragons. The old reclamation facility transformed into a hidden sanctuary. But word was spreading in ways Dennis couldn't control. Other service workers started approaching him. A kitchen worker who had noticed him taking extra food scraps. A dock loader who had seen Rena making unusual trips to the lower levels. A cleaning technician who recognized the smell of dragon scales from old historical records. None of them reported him. Instead, they offered help. A network formed quietly among the workers that no one else noticed. People who spent their lives invisible to the wealthy traders and officials conducting business above their heads. They moved supplies, created distractions, and kept watch for security patrols. Dennis realized these people understood something important. They were all considered unimportant by the station's elite, but together they had power. The evening they moved the dragons to their new home, Dennis felt terrified and hopeful at once. He led Pip, Dot, and Clover through maintenance tunnels that wound deep into the station's infrastructure. Chithrax walked ahead, checking for security sensors. Rena followed behind, ready to provide medical care if any of the dragons became stressed. The old reclamation facility was perfect. Large enough for the dragons to spread their wings. Warm and dry, hidden behind layers of outdated equipment and forgotten machinery. When the dragons saw their new space, Pip immediately took flight, her wings carrying her in circles around the high ceiling. Dot and Clover raced after their sister, all 3 of them calling out with joy. Dennis watched them fly and felt something tight in his chest loosen. This was what they needed. Room to grow, to be themselves, to live like the magnificent creatures they were meant to become. They are happy, Chithrax observed. You have given them a gift. I just didn't want them to die. That is where it started. But look at what you have built. A sanctuary, a community of protectors, a chance for an entire species to survive. Over the following days, the dragons thrived in their new home. They grew even larger, now the size of ponies. Their personalities developed distinct traits. Pip was bold and adventurous, always exploring. Dot was careful and intelligent, solving problems with surprising creativity. Clover was affectionate and social, constantly seeking attention and physical contact. Dennis visited them twice a day, spending every free moment in the hidden facility. The dragons always greeted him with enthusiasm, climbing over each other to be near him. He brought them food, cleaned their space, and simply sat with them while they rested. Sometimes he talked to them about his daughter, about his life, about his hopes that they would grow up safe and free. But the security net was tightening. Commander Brex, the station's head of security, had intensified his investigation. The Thorian officer was known for his rigid adherence to regulations and his thorough methods. Dennis saw more security patrols in the service levels, more questions being asked. One morning, Rena arrived at the facility looking worried. Brex is pushing for a full deck-by-deck search. He told the station administrator that he suspects smuggling operations in the lower levels. Someone is feeding him information. How much time do we have? Days at most, maybe less. Rena looked at the dragons who were playing in the far corner of the facility. Dennis, you need to understand something. This is bigger than we thought. I accessed some restricted files through my medical clearance. The military has been monitoring communications on this station. They know something survived. They want these dragons dead. Why? What threat are 3 babies? They are proof that the genocide was not complete. They are evidence of what the military did. If word spreads that Dracons still exist, people will start asking questions about what really happened to their world. The military cannot allow that. Chithrax, who had been working on installing additional air filters, turned toward them. Then we prepare for the worst. I have connections in the dock workers union. If we need to evacuate the dragons, there are ships that would carry them. Where would they go? Dennis asked. There is no safe place for them. Then we make a safe place, Rena said with conviction. We find allies. We fight. That night Dennis couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk thinking about the 3 dragons in their hidden sanctuary. thinking about all the people who were risking everything to protect them, thinking about his daughter Sarah and how he had been powerless to save her. He wasn't powerless now, but he was running out of options. At 0400 hours, alarms blared throughout the service levels. Dennis bolted awake and grabbed his datapad. Emergency alerts flooded the screen. Security teams were conducting surprise inspections of all lower-level facilities. They were moving systematically through every maintenance area, every storage room, every forgotten corner of the station. They were heading toward the old reclamation facility. Dennis ran. He used every shortcut he knew, moving through tunnels and access corridors with desperate speed. Other workers were in the passages too, all heading the same direction. Somehow they all knew. The network had activated itself. When Dennis arrived at the facility, he found Commander Brex already there with a full security team. The heavy door was open and lights illuminated the interior. The three dragons were backed into the far corner, their wings spread in smoke rising from their nostrils. Pip stood in front of her siblings, protecting them. She was magnificent and terrifying, her blue scales catching the light, her eyes fixed on the intruders. Dennis pushed through the security team. "Stop, do not hurt them." Commander Brex turned toward him. The Thorian was tall and heavily built, with gray skin and sharp features. His eyes held no warmth. "Dennis Walsh, maintenance worker, Level 3. You are under arrest for harboring illegal biological specimens, theft of station resources, and violation of the Heritage Preservation Act. The penalty is life imprisonment." They are babies. They were going to die. They are classified as extinct. The law is clear. Behind Dennis, more people were arriving. Service workers from every department. Kitchen staff, cleaners, engineers, medical techs. Dozens of them, then more. They filled the corridor outside the facility. A silent crowd of beings from multiple species, all united in purpose. Chithrak stepped forward. "Then arrest us all." We all knew. We all helped. Rena moved to stand beside Dennis. "These creatures have harmed no one. They deserve to live." The crowd echoed their support, voices calling out in different languages, but all saying the same thing. The dragons would not be taken. Not without a fight. Commander Breck stood surrounded by dozens of service workers who had materialized from every corner of the station. His security team looked uncertain, hands hovering near their weapons but not drawing them. The crowd continued to grow, filling the corridor and spilling into adjacent passages. Station workers who had been invisible their entire careers now stood visible and united. Behind the security team, the three dragons remained pressed into the corner. Pip kept her body between her siblings and the strangers, smoke curling from her nostrils in warning. Dot and Clover huddled behind their protective sister, their eyes wide and frightened. Dennis stepped between Brex and the dragons. His voice shook, but his feet stayed planted. "You will have to go through me first." Brex's face remained impassive. He pulled out his datapad and began reading formal charges. "Dennis Walsh, you are charged with harboring illegal biological specimens in violation of Section 47 of the Galactic Heritage Preservation Act. You are charged with theft of station resources including food, medical supplies, and power allocation. You are charged with falsifying work reports and unauthorized access to restricted databases. Do you deny these charges?" "No, I did all of it." "They would have died otherwise. Your motivations are irrelevant. The law exists for important reasons. Extinct species must remain undisturbed to preserve historical integrity. The penalty for violations is life imprisonment without possibility of release. You will be transferred to a correctional facility immediately." Rena pushed through the crowd. "Historical integrity? These are living creatures, not museum pieces. They breathe and feel and deserve to exist." "The law does not recognize extinct species as living beings," Brex replied. "They are classified as biological artifacts." Chithrax's clicking voice rose above the murmurs of the crowd. "Then the law is wrong. We will not allow you to take them." Brex's hand moved toward his weapon. His security team tensed, reading his body language. The situation balanced on a knife edge, ready to tip into violence. Then something unexpected happened. Station-wide communication screens flickered to life throughout the facility. The face of an elderly Valtorian appeared, her blue skin marked with age and wisdom. She wore the formal robes of a Galactic Council member. "This is Council Member Thessian. I am broadcasting on all frequencies. What is happening on Orbital Station Meridian 7 is being witnessed by millions across the galaxy. The images of 3 young Dracons, alive and healthy, have spread to every connected world. Citizens are demanding answers. Breck stared at the screen with visible shock. How did you get this signal? In the crowd, a dock worker held up a small camera. Others held similar devices. They had been recording everything and broadcasting it live. The secret was no longer secret. The whole galaxy was watching. Thessian continued. Commander Brex, I am formally invoking the ancient right of protection. This is an emergency measure that allows Council members to temporarily halt actions that may result in species extinction. You are ordered to cease all hostile activity immediately. This matter will be brought before the full Galactic Council for deliberation. With respect, Council member, I have my orders from Station Security Administration. These creatures are illegal. Your orders are superseded by Council authority. Stand down, Commander. That is not a request. Brex looked at his security team, at the crowd of workers, at the dragons, and finally at his datapad where new orders were appearing. He read them slowly, his jaw tight. When he looked up, something in his expression had changed. Not softer exactly, but conflicted. The Council has issued temporary protection status, he said quietly. All enforcement actions are suspended pending review. He turned to his team. Stand down. Clear the area. The security officers lowered their weapons and began backing away. The crowd didn't move, still forming a protective barrier around the facility entrance. Brex walked slowly toward Dennis and the workers tensed, but the commander stopped several feet away. He looked past Dennis to where the three dragons waited. Pip had relaxed slightly, though she still watched with alert eyes. Clover, the smallest and most curious, had moved from behind her sister. She tilted her head, studying Brex with interest. I had orders once before, Brex said, his voice barely audible. During the Draken Purge, I was a junior officer. We were told the Drakons were dangerous, that they threatened galactic security. I followed my orders. I did what I was commanded to do. The facility went silent. Everyone watched as the rigid commander seemed to struggle with words. I was there when we bombarded their world. I watched the cities burn from orbit. We were told there were no civilians, only military targets. But I saw the evacuation ships trying to flee, small ships filled with families. We destroyed them. Those were our orders. Clover took a step toward Brex, then another. Pip made a warning sound but didn't stop her smallest sister. The green dragon walked across the facility floor, completely unafraid, until she stood directly in front of the commander who had participated in destroying her species. Brex stood frozen. His hands trembled at his sides. Clover stretched out her neck and sniffed his hand, the same gesture she used when greeting Dennis or Rena, or any of the trusted people who visited them. I cannot undo what I did, Brex whispered. I cannot bring back your people, but I will not follow such orders again. Never again. Clover made a soft chirping sound and pressed her head against Brex's palm. The commander's carefully maintained control finally broke. He dropped to his knees and placed both hands on the dragon's head, his shoulders shaking. The entire galaxy watched a military officer weep for the atrocity he had committed. Dennis approached slowly. She forgives you. Maybe you should forgive yourself. Brex looked up with eyes that held decades of guilt. How can I? By helping us protect them. By making sure what happened to the Drakons never happens to anyone else. The commander stood slowly, carefully removing his hands from Clover. The dragon chirped once more and returned to her siblings. Brex turned to face the crowd and the camera still broadcasting everything. I am Commander Brex of Station Security. I participated in the genocide of the Draken species 30 years ago. I was told I was following lawful orders. I was wrong. What we did was murder. These 3 dragons are proof that we failed to complete our mission. I am grateful we failed. He removed his security badge and placed it on the ground. I resign my commission. I will testify before the Galactic Council about what really happened during the Purge, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. A message appeared on every screen in the facility. It came from Admiral Torvin, a high-ranking military officer known for his ruthless efficiency. The text was brief and cold. Commander Brex, you are relieved of duty effective immediately. Orbital Station Meridian 7 has been designated a security threat. A military fleet is en route to enforce proper protocols. Estimated arrival time 2 hours. All inhabitants are ordered to surrender the illegal biological specimens and the humans harboring them. Failure to comply will result in forced evacuation and station lockdown. Dennis felt his blood turn cold. They are sending a fleet? Rena checked her datapad. 5 military cruisers. Heavy class. They can disable the entire station if they choose. Chithrax clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. They will take the dragons. They will kill them to hide the evidence of what was done. The crowd of workers began talking urgently among themselves. Some argued for hiding the dragons, others for fighting, others for negotiation. Fear spread through the group like fire. These were maintenance workers and kitchen staff and cleaners, not soldiers. They had no weapons, no training, no way to resist a military fleet. Dennis walked to the center of the facility where everyone could see him. He held up his hands and waited for quiet. When all eyes were on him, he spoke clearly. I am nobody special, just a janitor. Most of you never noticed me before this. But I found 3 babies dying in the cold and I could not walk away. I will not walk away now. He looked at the dragons. Pip, Dot, and Clover watched him with trust in their eyes. They didn't understand the danger. They only knew he had kept them safe. The military is coming because they fear the truth. These dragons prove that the purge was not complete. They prove that genocide happened. If we surrender them, we are saying that power decides who deserves to live. We are saying that compassion is weakness and mercy is a crime. Dennis's voice grew stronger. But if we stand together, if we protect these innocent lives, we are saying something different. We are saying that every life has value, that the smallest among us deserve protection, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose courage over fear. The workers listened in silence. Then one by one they began to nod. A kitchen worker stepped forward. I stand with the dragons. A dock loader moved beside him. I stand with the dragons. Rena raised her hand. I stand with the dragons. Chithrax clicked agreement. I stand with the dragons. Former Commander Brex, no longer in uniform, joined them. I stand with the dragons. The voices multiplied, filling the facility and echoing through the communication system still broadcasting to the galaxy. Hundreds of voices, then thousands, as other station residents heard what was happening and added their support. Species that had never cooperated before united behind 3 baby dragons and the janitor who saved them. Station Administrator Colas appeared on the screens, his face stressed. This is madness. We cannot resist a military fleet. We must negotiate. But Council Member Thessian's face replaced his. Administrator Colas, you are overruled. The citizens of your station have made their choice. The Galactic Council will honor the ancient right of protection. If the military attacks, they will be in violation of Council law. Admiral Torvin's response came quickly. Council Member, your protection order is noted and rejected. The security of the galaxy supersedes individual Council authority. We will board the station and retrieve the specimens by force if necessary. Outside the station, visible on external monitors, 5 massive military cruisers took up positions. Weapon systems powered up, their targeting sensors sweeping the station's defenses. 2 hours had passed faster than anyone realized. Dennis looked at the 3 dragons who had changed everything. Pip spread her wings protectively over her siblings. Dot pressed close to her sister. Clover made a small sound that might have been fear or determination. Whatever happens, Dennis said quietly, you will never be alone again. The first shot from the military fleet struck the station's outer shields. The station shuddered as the military fleet's warning shot hit the outer shields. Alarms blared throughout every level, emergency lights flashing red. Dennis instinctively moved closer to the dragons, his body positioning itself between them and danger, even though the threat came from ships outside the station. Pip roared, a sound that shook the walls of the reclamation facility. It was the first time any of them had heard a full dragon roar, and it carried power that spoke of ancient strength. Dot and Clover joined their sister, 3 voices combining into something primal and defiant. Station Administrator Colas appeared on every screen, his voice tight with panic. All residents proceed to emergency shelters immediately. The military has declared this a forced compliance action. I am ordering the surrender of the biological specimens and their caretakers. This is not negotiable. But the residents of Meridian 7 did not move toward shelters. Instead, they moved toward the lower levels. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species converged on the reclamation facility, forming a living barrier between the dragons and anyone who might try to take them. They brought supplies, medical equipment, and tools that could be used as weapons if necessary. A Krellin merchant pushed through the crowd carrying containers of food. I trade for profit, not principle. But I will not profit from murder. These supplies are for the dragons and anyone protecting them. Others brought power cells, thermal blankets, and communication equipment. The service workers who had been invisible their entire careers were joined by traders, technicians, administrators, and even some security officers who defied their orders to stand with the resistance. Rena organized the medical supplies while Chithrax worked with other engineers to reinforce the facility's structural supports. Former Commander Brex coordinated defensive positions, his military training suddenly valuable in an unexpected way. Admiral Torvin's voice cut through the chaos. "Station Meridian 7, you have 1 hour to comply. Surrender the specimens and the human designated Dennis Walsh. If you refuse, we will board by force and arrest all participants in this illegal action." Dennis looked at the people surrounding him. They were putting their lives at risk for 3 dragons they barely knew, and a janitor most of them had never noticed before. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. These consequences were his fault. His choice to save 3 freezing babies had led to this confrontation. "Maybe I should surrender," he said quietly to Rena. "Maybe if I turn myself in, the rest of you will be safe." Rena grabbed his arm. "If you surrender, the dragons die. Everyone here knows that. They are choosing to fight anyway. Why? I am nobody. The dragons are just animals to most species. You are wrong about both things. You showed every person on this station that one individual can make a difference. That ordinary courage can challenge extraordinary power. As for the dragons, look at them." Dennis turned toward Pip, Dot, and Clover. The 3 dragons had moved to the edge of the crowd, observing the gathered beings with intelligent curiosity. Clover approached a small child, a Valtorian girl who had come with her parents. The dragon lowered her head and the child reached out, touching the green scales with wonder. Clover made a gentle purring sound. "They are not just animals," Rena continued. "They are children. And children of any species deserve protection." The hour passed too quickly. When Admiral Torvin's deadline expired, the military fleet began its assault in earnest. Energy weapons struck the station's shields repeatedly, each impact causing the structure to shake. The shields held, but power levels dropped with every hit. "They are not trying to destroy us," Brex observed, watching tactical displays. "They are depleting our power reserves. When the shields fail, they will board." "How long do we have?" Dennis asked. "Maybe 3 hours. Maybe less, but help came from an unexpected source. Ships began arriving from nearby systems. Civilian vessels, cargo haulers, even a few small defense craft from independent colonies. They took up positions between the military fleet and the station, not attacking but forming a barrier. Admiral Torvin transmitted again, his voice sharp with frustration. "Unidentified vessels, you are interfering with a military operation. Clear the area immediately or face arrest," a voice responded, older and firm. "This is Captain Yosef of the freighter Endless Horizon. We are not interfering. We are observing. The whole galaxy is watching what you do here, Admiral. We are simply making sure they have a clear view." More ships arrived, then more. Within an hour, dozens of civilian craft surrounded the station. None carried weapons that could challenge a military cruiser, but their presence changed the equation. If Admiral Torvin ordered an attack now, civilian casualties would be unavoidable. On the surface of 36 worlds, protests erupted. The footage of Commander Brex's confession had spread everywhere. Images of 3 baby dragons huddled together while a janitor protected them touched something fundamental in species across the galaxy. Questions were being asked about the Dracon Purge. Old records were being examined. The military's justifications were falling apart under scrutiny. Inside the reclamation facility, Dennis sat with the dragons while the station's fate hung in balance. Pip had calmed down, her protective instincts relaxing as she sensed the people around her meant no harm. Dot practiced manipulating small objects, moving tools and supplies with her claws in patterns that suggested she was learning constantly. Clover had fallen asleep against Dennis's side, exhausted by the stress and excitement. "I never wanted to be important," Dennis said to no one in particular. "I just wanted to do my job and not cause trouble." Breck sat down beside him. "Neither did I. I wanted to follow orders and serve with honor. But following orders made me participate in genocide. You showed more honor by breaking rules than I ever did by following them. The Admiral will not give up. He cannot afford to back down. No, but he cannot afford to attack either. Not with the whole galaxy watching. Not with civilian ships in his firing line. He is trapped by the consequences of his own threats. A new transmission appeared on all screens, not from Admiral Torvin. The seal of the Galactic Council filled the display and 12 faces appeared. The full council, something that only happened for matters of extraordinary importance. Council member Thessian spoke first. This emergency session of the Galactic Council has been convened to address the situation at Orbital Station Meridian 7. We have reviewed the evidence presented. We have examined historical records of the Dracon Purge. We have heard testimony from multiple sources. The Council will now hear from the principal parties involved. Admiral Torvin appeared in one section of the screen. The military acted within established protocols. The Dracon species was classified as extinct. Maintenance of that classification requires elimination of any surviving specimens. This is standard procedure for preservation of historical accuracy. Historical accuracy, Thessian repeated slowly. You mean covering up genocide? I mean following the law as written. And if the law is wrong? The Admiral had no answer for that. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Another council member spoke, a Thorian like Brex. Commander Brex, you have submitted testimony regarding your participation in the original purge. Please summarize for this council. Brex stood, facing the camera that broadcast his words to the galaxy. 30 years ago, I participated in the destruction of the Dracon homeworld. We were told they posed a military threat. We were told civilian casualties would be minimal. Both statements were lies. The Dracons refused to become weapons for the military coalition. They were peaceful. They were eliminated because they would not fight in wars they did not believe in. I helped commit genocide, and I've spent 30 years telling myself I was just following orders. I was wrong. Orders do not absolve responsibility. The confession hung in the air. Billions of beings across the galaxy heard a military officer admit to war crimes. The implications would ripple through governments and institutions for years. Thessian turned to another camera. Dennis Walsh, you are charged with multiple violations of galactic law. How do you respond? Dennis stood, feeling absurd standing before the most powerful governmental body in the galaxy. He was a janitor. He cleaned floors and emptied trash. But he had started this, so he would finish it. I found 3 babies dying in the cold. I saved them because that is what decent people do. They are not specimens or artifacts or historical footnotes. They are living beings who deserve to exist. If that is a crime, then I am guilty. But I will not apologize for choosing compassion over cruelty. Another council member, a insectoid similar to Chithrax, spoke. Your actions have caused significant disruption. A military fleet has been deployed. Civilians are at risk. The stability of this entire sector is threatened. All because you refuse to follow established law. With respect, Counselor, the law demanded I let children die. That is not a law worth following. You are one person. You cannot decide which laws apply to you. Dennis felt anger rise hot and sharp. And you are 12 people deciding which species deserve to live. That is worse. The chamber went silent. No one contradicted him. Thessian leaned forward. Council member Brechtal, your point is noted but perhaps misdirected. The question before us is not whether Dennis Walsh broke the law. Clearly he did. The question is whether the law itself is just. Can this council truly defend a policy that demands the execution of the last survivors of a species destroyed by our own military forces? Arguments erupted among council members. Some defended existing protocols. Others questioned how such laws came to exist. Still others demanded investigation into the original purge and who authorized it. While the council debated, Admiral Torvin made a decision. His ships moved into boarding positions. This has gone on long enough. I am exercising military authority to restore order. Council deliberations can continue after the specimens are secured. Energy signatures spiked as the fleet prepared to disable the station's remaining shields. The civilian ships between the station and the fleet broadcast emergency signals but had no weapons to intervene. Inside the reclamation facility, the gathered residents braced for impact. Then Pip did something unexpected. The Blue Dragon moved to the center of the facility, spread her wings to their full impressive span and roared. Not in fear or anger, in song. The sound was unlike anything Dennis had heard before. It carried harmonics that resonated in his chest and made his eyes water. Dot and Clover joined their sister, adding their voices to the song. 3 dragons singing together. their voices combining into something ancient and powerful. Every screen showing the confrontation broadcast that sound. Across the galaxy, billions of beings heard Dragon Song for the first time in 30 years. It spoke of loss and survival, of endings and beginnings, of hope persisting through darkness. Admiral Torvin's attack order never came. His ships held position, weapons charged but not firing. On the bridge of his flagship, the Admiral sat frozen, listening to a sound he had never expected to hear again. The Dragon Song ended. In the silence that followed, Thessian's voice was quiet but firm. The ancient right of protection is hereby confirmed and made permanent. The Dracon species is declared endangered and protected under the highest level of galactic law. All charges against Dennis Walsh and his allies are dismissed. This matter is resolved. The crowd in the reclamation facility erupted in cheers. 3 months passed before Dennis stood in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. The journey from orbital station Meridian 7 to the Council homeworld had taken weeks, and every day of travel felt surreal. He was still just a janitor, but now he traveled on diplomatic vessels and spoke with government officials who needed his testimony. The 3 dragons accompanied him everywhere. Pip, Dot, and Clover were fully grown now, their bodies magnificent and powerful. Pip's blue scales shimmered like deep water. Dot's silver coloring caught light and reflected it in complex patterns. Clover's green was rich as earth forests. They were beautiful and intelligent and alive, the last survivors of a murdered species. The Grand Chamber held thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds. Cameras broadcast the proceedings across the galaxy, just as they had broadcast the confrontation at the station. Dennis sat in a witness chair that felt too large and too exposed. The dragons rested nearby, their presence a constant reminder of what this hearing was really about. The prosecutor, a stern Peltharian official named Corvin, presented the charges against Dennis. Each violation was read in detail: harboring illegal biologicals, theft of station resources, falsifying work reports, unauthorized access to restricted databases. The list went on. If convicted on all charges, Dennis would spend the rest of his life in prison. "How do you plead?" Corvin demanded. "Guilty," Dennis replied simply. "I did everything you described. I would do it again. You show no remorse?" "I regret breaking laws. I do not regret saving lives," Corvin turned to the council. "This human admits his crimes. He shows defiance rather than repentance. The law must be upheld or it means nothing. I recommend the maximum penalty." Thessian, presiding over the hearing, nodded calmly. "Your recommendation is noted. Now we will hear testimony from other parties. Commander Brex, please approach." Brex walked to the testimony platform. He had aged in the past 3 months, as if confessing his role in the purge had released years of accumulated stress. But he stood straight and spoke clearly. "I participated in the destruction of the Draken homeworld. I followed orders that I believed were lawful. Those orders were based on fabricated intelligence reports created by military contractors who wanted access to the planet's resources. The Drakens were peaceful. They refused to serve as weapons in wars they did not support. For this, they were labeled a threat and eliminated." Brex pulled up documents on the chamber's display screens, classified files that showed planning discussions, resource surveys, and communications between military officials and corporate interests. The evidence was damning. The purge had not been a military necessity. It had been corporate genocide with government approval. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Council members who had not known the full truth demanded explanations. Those who had suspected remained silent, their complicity now exposed. Rena testified next, describing her medical care for the dragons. She presented detailed records showing their intelligence, their emotional capacity, their ability to communicate and form bonds. "These are not specimens," she said firmly. "They are children who should never have been orphaned." Chithrak spoke about the community that formed to protect the dragons, about how service workers from dozens of species united despite having no prior connections. "Humans have a gift," the insectoid engineer explained. "They see worth in all beings regardless of status or species. Dennis Walsh is not a criminal. He is what every species should aspire to be, someone who protects the vulnerable simply because it is right." When the testimonies concluded, Thessian called for a recess. The council members needed to deliberate in private. Dennis was led to a waiting room where the dragons joined him. They were restless, sensing his tension. Clover pressed her large head against his chest, seeking comfort or offering it. "I am sorry," Dennis whispered to them. I tried to give you a life. Now I may have just traded my freedom for yours. Pip made a low rumbling sound. It carried meaning even without words: gratitude, loyalty, love. The deliberation took 6 hours. When the council reconvened, every delegate was present. The chamber was silent as Thessian stood to deliver the verdict. Dennis Walsh, you have admitted to multiple violations of galactic law. The evidence against you is clear and undisputed. However, this council must also consider the context of your actions and the nature of the laws you violated. Thessian paused, her old eyes sweeping the chamber. The Heritage Preservation Act was created with good intentions, to protect historical records and prevent contamination of archaeological sites, but it was twisted into a tool for covering up atrocities. The classification of the Dracons as extinct was not based on their actual extinction. It was based on a desire to hide genocide. She turned to face Dennis directly. You broke unjust laws to preserve innocent lives. You risked everything for beings who could offer you nothing in return. You showed courage that shames this council, for we should have questioned these laws long ago. We should have investigated the purge when evidence of wrongdoing first surfaced. We failed, you did not. Thessian's voice grew stronger. This council formally apologizes for the genocide committed against the Dracon species. We acknowledge the crimes committed by military forces acting under our authority. Reparations will be paid. Those responsible will be held accountable. Most importantly, we declare that such atrocities must never happen again. She looked at the documents before her. All charges against Dennis Walsh are dismissed. Furthermore, the council creates a new position, Guardian of Endangered Species. This position will have the authority to protect vulnerable species and investigate potential threats to their survival. Dennis Walsh, we offer you this position. Will you accept? Dennis sat stunned. He had expected prison, maybe execution, not a job offer from the most powerful government in the galaxy. I am just a janitor, he said weakly. You were a janitor, Thessian corrected. Now you are the person who saved the last dragons. The galaxy needs more people like you in positions of authority. People who value life over protocol. Will you serve? Dennis looked at the 3 dragons. Pip met his eyes with trust. Dot tilted her head, curious about his answer. Clover made a small, encouraging chirp. Yes, Dennis said, I will serve. The chamber erupted in applause. Not from everyone. Some delegates sat silent, unhappy with the outcome, but most recognized that something important had shifted. The rigid structures that allowed genocide to be hidden behind bureaucracy had cracked. Maybe the cracks would become breaks. Maybe real change was possible. Over the following weeks, Dennis worked with scientists and diplomats to establish a sanctuary for the dragons. A protected moon in a system far from major trade routes offered everything they needed: vast spaces to fly and hunt, caves for shelter, water and vegetation. Most importantly, safety from those who might still wish them harm. But the sanctuary grew beyond just a home for 3 dragons. Investigations following Brex's testimony uncovered other hidden survivals. Species declared extinct that had been deliberately hidden or saved by whistleblowers. Eggs preserved in illegal storage. Genetic samples that could restore populations. The scale of what had been hidden and lost was staggering. The whistleblower who had saved the dragon eggs and placed them where Dennis would find them never revealed their identity, but encrypted messages arrived periodically, providing coordinates for other hidden survivors. Each message ended with the same line: humans have a reputation. They protect. They fight for the helpless. Trust them. Dennis became the galaxy's most unexpected important person. He gave speeches to assemblies and met with leaders, always uncomfortable with attention but always advocating for the vulnerable. He built a team of protectors from dozens of species, all dedicated to preventing another genocide. Former Commander Brex joined that team, seeking redemption through action. Rena became the sanctuary's chief medical officer, studying Dracon biology and caring for new survivors brought to safety. Chithrax designed facilities that could house any species, environments that could be adjusted for any need. The sanctuary grew. Other extinct species arrived. Melodians, whose telepathic abilities had made them targets for control experiments. Phalans, whose world had been strip-mined until their population collapsed. Threlix, who had been hunted to near extinction for their valuable shells. Each species found safety and a chance to recover under Dennis's protection. Pip, Dot, and Clover thrived in their new home. They flew daily over the valleys and mountains, their dragon songs echoing across the landscape. They were adults now, but still sought Dennis out constantly. Still pressed against him when he sat in the evening. Still chirped with joy when he arrived for visits. One evening, a year after the council hearing, Dennis sat in a field watching the triple sunset. The dragons played in the sky, diving and spinning in pure happiness. On the hillside behind him, melodian younglings sang in harmonies that made the air shimmer. In the valley, violon families grazed peacefully. The sanctuary held 36 species now, all recovering, all safe. Rena joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. The council sent another message. They want to know if you will accept another rescue mission. A species called the Corvash. Military found their last few dozen survivors in an abandoned research facility. What were they researching? Genetic modification, weaponization, the usual horrors. Dennis sighed but nodded. Tell them I will help. We need to bring the Corvash here. You know this is changing the galaxy. Your work is forcing governments to confront what they allowed. Some species are not happy about it. Some species profited from genocide. I do not care if they are happy. Rena smiled. The quiet janitor has become quite outspoken. I learned from 3 baby dragons. They never stayed quiet when something was wrong. Pip noticed them sitting and descended from the sky, landing with surprising grace for such a large creature. Her siblings followed. All 3 dragons surrounded Dennis and Rena, creating a protective circle as they had done since they were small enough to fit in his hands. Clover nuzzled Dennis's shoulder. He reached up and stroked her scales, feeling their warmth. I never set out to change anything, he said quietly. I just wanted to help 3 babies who were cold and alone. Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest changes, Rena replied. Sometimes the least important person becomes exactly who the universe needs. Dennis watched the sun set, painting the sky in colors that Earth had never shown him. The dragons hummed contentedly, a sound that vibrated in his chest. Other species in the sanctuary called out to each other, settling down for the night. All of them alive because someone had decided their lives mattered. They will never be alone again, Dennis said. None of them. In the distance, a ship was arriving with another group of survivors. The Corvash, scared and traumatized from years of captivity. They would need gentle care and patient rehabilitation. They would need someone to show them that not all beings meant them harm. They would need protection while they healed. Dennis stood and stretched. Come on. We have work to do. The 3 dragons roared in unison, a sound of joy that echoed across the sanctuary. It was a sound that spoke of survival and hope, a family found and futures claimed. It was the sound of life refusing to be silenced. Dennis Walsh had been nobody special, just a janitor cleaning forgotten corners of a space station. But he had seen 3 freezing babies and chosen compassion over convenience. That choice had rippled outward, touching billions of lives, reshaping laws, and forcing a galaxy to confront its failures. The dragons would never be alone again, and neither would he. Together, they would keep fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. Together, they would prove that kindness was not weakness, that mercy was not foolishness, and that one person choosing courage could change everything. Above the sanctuary, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Each one represented a world. Each world held species that might need protection someday. It was overwhelming work. Impossible work. But Dennis had learned something important from 3 baby dragons. Impossible just meant it would take effort. And effort was something he understood. He had spent years cleaning and maintaining and doing the work nobody else wanted. Now he had a different job. But the principle was the same. Take care of what needs caring for. Protect what needs protecting. Show up every day and do the work. The dragons pressed close to him as they walked toward the incoming ship. Pip on his right, Dot on his left. Clover slightly ahead as always, eager to meet the new arrivals. Together they moved through the sanctuary, past dozens of species who had been given a second chance at life. The Corvash survivors would be frightened. They would need time to trust. But Dennis had time. He had patience. He had 3 dragons who would show them that some beings protected instead of hurt, that some places were safe. That extinction did not have to be the end of hope. Just a janitor and 3 dragons, changing the galaxy one rescue at a time. The sun finished setting. The stars grew brighter. The work continued,